is not the primary basis for his opinion about drying times. It is just something he did, as I mentioned earlier, as an impromptu thing after he came and made his presentation to us on June 3rd, the day before he left for Sweden. He went back home and he just did it. And he made notes on what he did, and I had asked him to produce every single note that he had regarding the subject matter of his testimony here, and so he produced those notes. But I think the experiment is relevant, again, because he simply wanted to produce a range of values. So he took very extreme conditions, Your Honor, extreme conditions as to the amount of blood that was used, and how it was put on the sock and under what conditions it was put on the sock. I don't believe that the actual temperature at which the experiment was conducted is at issue as to the experiment's admissibility. And I believe that Professor McDonald will be able to lay the proper foundation to have those experimental results introduced. But as I said a moment ago, Your Honor, even that experiment is not essential for Professor McDonald to render his opinion as to drying times on sheer fabric such as the fabric in question in this case. Let me just make sure that I've covered every other point.
Let me ask you one other question.
Certainly,
The report indicates that the blood had to be, quote, teased into the fabric. In other words, apparently had to be pressed or manipulated or somehow pushed into the fabric to get it to adhere. In this situation, we have what appears to be either a blood drop, which I can see given the nature of the injuries that the victim suffered, but you're saying it's a smear.
It's a smear, and Professor McDonald will testify that it's a smear.
So you're saying maybe one of the victims grabbed at the socks or something like that and smeared their blood on the
I'm
socks?
not saying that a victim grabbed the sock. It is the position of the defense, Your Honor.
Well, I understand that, but let's say the perpetrator socks.
No, I'm not saying that, Your Honor. I'm saying that that blood was put on those socks long after June 13th.
All right.
Okay? But what there is no question about, and what Professor McDonald testified to, it is not a drop, it is not spatter, it is a smear. It is a deliberate smear on the socks. And there is no question about that.
I mean, why shouldn't I be concerned that under this experiment with this sock that the material had to be manipulated to get the blood to adhere?
Oh, no, it didn't have to. If you look at the notes, in fact, for that experiment on June, just one moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
It's not in the report, it's in the June 6th experiment. What he did on spot 1, as opposed to spot 2, in spot 2, he didn't tease it in. In spot 1, he deliberately put in more and more blood. He put in quantitatively a lot more blood in spot 1 when he teased it in, because he deliberately wanted to saturate it to an extreme. Remember, I told you he's now doing an experiment to show, if I take the most extreme conditions, a lot more blood to soak in as much blood as possible. So don't just swipe it and make a smear, but instead let's take the blood and almost sort of knead it in, okay, like bread or something, into the material to make sure it gets all the way through to the other side of the sock and even comes out the other side of the sock onto a glass table. So there is actually blood on the glass table that sock is in. That's why he's teasing it. He's deliberately teasing it. He didn't do that if you look at experiment number 2 in the notes, where he says that the human blood was simply swiped over the surface. In that instance, he didn't do any teasing at all, and he records the drying times for that stain.
All right. Mr. Neufeld, let me ask you one other question. Do you have the citation in the transcript for Mr. Matheson's testimony regarding his observations regarding the powder, what he termed as powder and blood?
It's not Mr. Matheson's, Mr.
I'm sorry,
Sims.
Mr. Sims.
Just in a minute, we're going to pull it right up for you. I think
All
it's
right.
also in his notes. But
No, I'd like to see what was presented to the jury in the form of testimony. Because basically what you have here is two issues. One, whether or not the stain inside the sock is powder, residue, and/or a transfer stain. Issue number one. Issue number two, is there substantial similarity for the drying expert? Those are the two, experiment. Those are the two issues.
And they're two separate issues.
They're two separate issues.
Right.
All right, what is Dr. McDonald's schedule at this point?
Well, what I would propose, Your Honor, is, first of all, since the microphotographs were turned over last week, the notes were turned over, I would propose if they need an additional day that he could stick around till tomorrow to testify, or he could testify on Friday morning. He is leaving for Canada a week from Friday for 2 weeks. So I would very much like to get him in. I think what this is really about is trying to have some more time to prepare a cross-examination of Professor McDonald. And if that's the case, and we can't do it tomorrow, and we can't do it Friday morning, Professor McDonald will come back early next week. But it's very important to us that he be able to testify at about this time in the case, because as Mr. Cochran has pointed out, we're trying to move the defense case along very, very quickly, and we'd like to wrap this up in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, all right. Well, why don't you get me the mention in the transcript regarding Mr. Sims. Let me know what Mr. McDonald, Dr. McDonald's schedule is. I'll take the matter under submission until I have the opportunity to reread the transcript regarding Mr. Sims' testimony.
Okay, so you don't need Mr. Sims' testimony at this moment. I can just give it to you later in the day.
Well, I'd like to have, what I'd like to do is finish Mr. Meraz this morning
And then decide this.
and perhaps decide this over the lunch hour.
All right, can we have it, so you can have the jury come back in, may we step out and look in the computer? So we
Please.
can generate this without wasting the court's time.
And then what will happen is I'll have to have one of my law clerks then pull up the transcript and make it available for me to review this afternoon.
Fine.
Respond briefly to Mr. Neufeld, and I mean very briefly. I want to get to Meraz, too.
I think I've heard the argument and I've read the points and authorities.
You have, and there's just, I'm talking about something I have not stated in response to what Mr. Neufeld has represented to the court.
What issue?
Concerning the stain on the sock and the appearance of the powder.
Well,
It's important that they be able to establish that that powder comes from that cutout stain.
I
But
understand,
it
Counsel,
doesn't match.
I understand there's an assumption, there's a factual assumption that one belongs to the other. I understand that.
Right, but I don't even think that Mr. McDonald is going to assert that the powder was in the same configuration as the cutout.
Well, we can't know that, can we? Since it was cut out and then tested.
No, what I'm saying is that the powder underlying the cutout could match the cutout, so that we'd know what was, you know what I mean? Does this make any?
I think I have a picture.
All right,
All right, thank you.
all right.
All right. All right. Let me know when you,
I have the site. There's more than one, but a starting point will be page,
also, if you would, do you have the photographs, the micro photographs of this particular location? Because you did give me
Xerox.
Xerox copies from which I can tell exactly nothing.
Okay,
All right?
yes. I'll give you the microphotographs that we intend to offer in evidence. What you should know is that it'll be the professor's testimony that when you do this microphotograph, you're zooming in on a very small area, and that he saw similar phenomena
I understand.
through, in a larger area.
If you recollect, we got to see this phenomena under the stereo microscope with the jury.
All right, what page is
All right, give that information to Mrs. Robertson. We need to clear for the jury.
that? Thank you.
All right, let's bring the jury down. All right, the record to reflect all the parties are again present. Jury is not present. Counsel, anything else we need to take up before we invite the jurors to join us?
I just want to make sure the court is aware that we have forthcoming motions on the other experiments for which we just got discovery. I said that informally to the court yesterday. I wanted to make it a matter of record that those are coming.
Ask me if I'm surprised. All right, let's have the jurors, please. All right, let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Meraz, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, just sit back, pull the microphone close to you, please. All right, good morning, Mr. Meraz.
Good morning.
You're reminded, sir, that you are still under oath. Mr. Cochran, you may continue with your direct examination.
Thank you very kindly, Your Honor, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning, Mr. Meraz.
Good morning.
Sir, yesterday we were talking about your role in picking up the Bronco vehicle on June 15th, 1994. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
And I want to, if I can, get a clear picture of the number of times that you had occasion to get inside that particular vehicle. Are you with me on that?
No.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'm trying to elicit at least the number of times that you had occasion to get inside the driver's side or driver's compartment of the Bronco. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Now, yesterday you described for us that when you went to the print shed, before you moved this vehicle, did you have occasion to get inside the vehicle at that time?
Yes, I did.
All right. And at that time, when you looked at that time, that would be the first time you got inside that vehicle, did you see any blood inside that vehicle any place?
No, I did not.
And the first time that you got inside that vehicle, can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you can, and paint a word picture for us of how you got inside the vehicle the first time at the print shed?
I pulled the car out of the print shed, pulled it out, and as I pulled the car out, I had to get into the passenger side, or driver's side, excuse me, driver's side of the vehicle, and I had half my body in and half my body out.
All right. Why don't you, if the court would allow, step down. This is time number one, as I understand it. Why don't you, if the court would allow, the seat there as the driver's compartment, and if you can demonstrate it for the jurors, show us how you stepped in at that point, if you can. You may step down from the stand if you need to.
I walked from my truck over to the vehicle, to the white Bronco. I went over to I opened the door. As I opened the door, I put one hand on the steering wheel. And as I put that hand on the steering wheel, I kind of did this, checked the steering so that it was locked. The reason I did that is so that a lot of times if you tow a vehicle, the steering wheel will break. It'll cause you to hit another car going out. And this is the reason I did that. As I came out, I checked the emergency brake, and that was it.
All right. So that's time number one.
That's number one.
And when you were inside that vehicle on that occasion, with your testimony, you didn't see any blood, right?
I didn't see any blood.
And did you see any black or dark gray print powder at that time?
No, I did not.
All right. Were there any keys in that vehicle at that point?
I didn't see any keys.
And I presume the door to that car was open, as you described it. You just opened the door, is that right?
Yes, the car was unlocked.
All right. Now, then you've described for us driving to Vertel's on Temple. Remember, recall that?
I recall that, yes.
Let me ask you this. Did you make any kind of communication or did you call ahead to Vertel's and tell them whether or not you were coming and which vehicle you were bringing there?
I think we covered this yesterday.
Do we, Your Honor? I know there was a stop. May I ask just one question, Your Honor? Just clarification.
All right.
Thank you.
I radioed in just before I got ready to leave.
All right. And with regard to that radioing in, did you make any indication of what car you were bringing there?
I had advised the shop that I was in tow with O.J. Simpson's car.
All right. Now, at that time, in the best of your estimation, how many employees did Vertel's have on Temple Street back on June 15th of 1994?
I would say 50 employees. I might be off by 2.
All right. So then you got to Vertel's, as we recall yesterday, and you parked that vehicle at a point called T3. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I would like, Your Honor, if I might, to mark as the defense next exhibit, counsel, I believe you've seen this,
12,
1254.
1254 here. Council's seen this, and may I approach this from over here?
You may.
All right. Now, I have a overhead photograph of Ports de Vertel with some numbers T1 through T5 on them. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at that and tell us whether or not the witness, Your Honor, is indicating he left his glasses, and I presume he needs them. May I go back and get them from
Yes.
someone? Thank you.
Now has his glasses.
Now, you have your glasses, and I'm going to ask you to take a look at this next exhibit, Defendant's 1254, and describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what is depicted in that photograph.
This is the picture of the yard of Vertel's Automotive. It's described in T1, T2, T3, T4, and T5.
Can you briefly share with us what those different numbers are? What is T1? What's depicted at T1?
Okay, T1, if a car is going to be left in the yard a length of time, it's put up there, or if it's drivable. If it has keys, it's put up into T1. T2 is basically an evidentially hold where they hold cars for hold for prints inside.
Okay.
T3 is the main yard. That's where all vehicles come in if they're wrecked. If there's a hole on it, a lot of times we keep them there. T4, basically cars, if they don't have wheels on them, we basically put them in there. T5, which is directly facing the freeway, also, they put cars with no wheels on there.
All right, Your Honor, I don't know if we can do this with the Elmo, but I'd like to demonstrate this for the jury.
I think we
Can
can.
we try this? Let's
Yeah.
Guess it can work. You pushed up a little bit. There you go. All right, now, you can look down. There's a monitor to your right, I think, might be a little more
Yes.
convenient for you. And is that what you've just described? The jury can now see the various areas of T1, T2, T3, T4, and T5?
Yes.
All right, sir. Would you show us, if you can, when you drove into the lot on this June 15th date with the Bronco in tow, you told us yesterday you parked it at T3, is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you just show us generally, and we can get a pointer for you, where on 1254 did you park the Bronco vehicle?
I parked it right in the middle of the lot, which is T3.
Do you see that arrow that's on the screen
The
there?
arrow's off. The
Okay,
arrow's...
can you direct the arrow in which direction to go, and it'll try to find it?
Okay, come down. Right. No. Come up. Come up. Right. Now go 2 inches. Right. Whoa, whoa. Right there. Right in there. No, no, you went too far. Right there is where I put the car.
That's where you put the car?
Yes.
Can we print that out?
Yes.
So that, and we'll put the initials of JM for John Meraz. That's where you put the Bronco. You took it on the 15th. And what time of day was that?
It was after 11 o'clock in the morning when I originally picked the car up.
Okay. Now, so that we're clear, and I want to make sure the court will allow me some indulgence on this, I want to address the witness with regard to 1253. We'll keep this up for a moment. Yesterday, you told us about this form, this vehicle investigation form, and I want to approach, if I can, Your Honor, again. And looking at this form, I noticed there are 2 places at the top that has something saying hold. In the left upper corner, there's an indication, Your Honor, prints/evidence, give special care. There's a box there. Was that box on the form that you had on June 15th, was that box ever checked?
No, it wasn't.
All right. Is there another box further over that's partially obscured on this form by a paper, by the hole puncher? Is there a hole, impounded hole there?
Well, you briefly see it. A little X right there on the hole.
All right. And with regard to that, did you have some conversation with the officer who signed this particular form about whether or not there was any special care holes on this particular vehicle?
I asked the officer 3 times if there was a hole on this car for prints, if there was a hole or okay to release. He stated to me, there's no hole, or excuse me, he stated there's a hole. I said, but there's no hole for prints. He says, no, there's a hole on it. If Hertz comes to pick the vehicle up, it's okay to release to them, but they have to go through robbery division to get it.
And that was as of June 15th, that it could be released to Hertz if they came to pick it up, although they had to go through robbery homicide. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, on this form, then, 1253, there's an indication on here, whole until released to representative from Hertz Corporation, RHD, robbery homicide handling. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you print that in, or did someone else print that in?
The officer did that.
The officer, and his name is H-A-R-O, Haro?
Haro.
Okay. Did you write anything else on this portion of the form?
Yes, I did. On the right-hand side of the impound, I put the license number of the vehicle. On the left-hand side, I put where I had put the car in T3.
All right, and Your Honor, if I might just show this also at this point.
Yes.
1253. We'll come back to that, Mr. There, so let's show 1253 on the Elmo. Now, the portion, let's start at the top, Mr. Harris. The portion you and I were just talking about at the top, in the upper left-hand corner, where it says print/evidence give special care. There was no, that box was not checked, was it?
That box was not checked, no.
Now, I want you to, the box we were talking about a moment ago, so it's clear for the jury, is over to the right where there's a copy made over, Your Honor, a hole for, from a hole puncher. Can you find that, Mr. Harris? Move to your left. Straight up. All right, move up straight up. Now, there's a box there. Under that, it says some kind of hole, does it not?
That's correct.
All right, and is that what you're alluding to, hole for Hertz?
That right there indicates to me that the car is held for robbery homicide, and if the owner is to pick it up, they would be sent to robbery homicide to get a release from them.
All right. And who was this vehicle registered to, if you know, sir?
I was told by the officer that the vehicle belonged to Hertz Rent-A-Car.
All right. Mr. Harris, let's come down on the form and we'll look at the portions that Mr. Meraz wrote in his own hand. Now, you described for us a moment ago that you wrote the license number of this particular vehicle. Is that correct? Can you show us where that is with the arrow?
Come on down with the arrow. Whoa, right there. Yes.
So where it indicates on 1253, 3CWS 788, you wrote that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you also indicate you wrote the letter and word T3.
On the left-hand side of that, with
All
a
right.
circle around it.
All right, and then below that, the officer whose name is in this form is Haro, Officer Haro, H-A-R-O. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, now we can go back to the larger 1254. Now, when you got to the location you described for us yesterday, there were a number of employees around. When you got there, describe for us how many people, how many employees came around you as you put that vehicle in T3, if you recall?
Could have been about 10 employees there waiting for me.
All right, and they were waiting for you?
Yes.
And did you have some conversation with them or any of these employees about whose vehicle this was?
Yes.
All right. And by virtue of that conversation, did you all look at the vehicle more closely?
I don't quite follow
Did
you.
did you have occasion to discuss whether or not there's any substance on this vehicle by virtue in conversation with these employees?
There. Yes.
And what did you talk about?
Well, the immediate news people had stated there was blood all over the car.
All right. So based upon your hearing that, what did you do, if anything?
I got curious.
All right, and when you got curious, what'd you do?
I looked to see if there was any blood in the vehicle.
Did you see any at that point?
I did not.
Now, when you got to the place and you unhooked the vehicle, did you have occasion to get back inside that vehicle again?
Yes, I did.
Again, we'll only do it if it's different than the way you got in the first time. This is time number 2. Can you describe for us, first of all, how you got inside the vehicle on the second occasion?
I did the same thing. I got in the vehicle, put both hands on the steering wheel. I had one portion of my leg into the seat, the other portion of my leg facing out. I extended out like this, looking into the vehicle. I was curious to see if there was any blood.
Indicating looking over his right shoulder.
Do you recall whether or not you looked at the console area?
I looked all over the car. By meaning all over the car, I looked in the front of the car.
All right. And did you see any blood at that point?
I didn't see any.
Did you look at the steering wheel?
Steering wheel was right in front of me. I didn't see any there either.
Do you recall looking at the floor of the vehicle? Did it look like as though the floor or the carpet on the floor had been modified in any way, Mr. Meraz?
The floor mat had been cut at the print shed, so there was no floor mat.
All right. Did you see anything else that looked different about that vehicle other than the floor mat being apparently missing?
No?
All right. Now, that was time number 2 that you were inside that particular vehicle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, while you're in the vehicle during time number 2, did you notice any kind of receipts or vouchers at that point at all?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe for the jury again what you noticed and where these receipts were?
The door was open, which is the driver's side that I was in. Open the door. There's a side pocket. There's a couple of receipts in there.
A side pocket on the driver's side of the Bronco?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you do with regard to those receipts?
I took them out of the car. I showed them to employees.
All right, now, why'd you take them out of the car?
I guess status, who the man was.
All right, now, meaning Mr. O.J. Simpson?
Yes.
Okay, so how many receipts did you take out of the door of the car?
2.
And did you have occasion to look at those receipts?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what those receipts said?
One bear the name of O.J. Simpson on a tuxedo. The other bear the name of Nicole Simpson, a dress, and other miscellaneous stuff on there.
Now, what were these? What were these documents? Were they for cleaners? What were they for?
Cleaners.
And you saw these yourself, and how many were they altogether?
There was 2.
All right. And you read them, and you saw
Yes.
both names of Mr. Simpson and Mrs. Simpson. Is that right?
Yes.
So when you took them out of the car during the second time you were inside that vehicle. Is that right? At T3.
You want to repeat that again, please?
Yeah, sure. Let me see if I can say it again. You took these items out of the Bronco during the second time that you were inside that Bronco, when you were at the point T3 at Vertel's.
That's correct.
Okay. And then what'd you do with them at that point?
I put them in my shirts, showed them around the employees.
Yeah, how many employees would you say you showed them to?
I have no actual count.
All right. And so you kept them in your shirt pocket for a while?
Yes.
Okay. Now, after you dropped that car off at T3, and after you'd taken these 2 receipts from a cleaner's, by the way, do you recall in your mind where that cleaner's was located?
Somewhere in Westwood. I don't know the name of it.
All right. Then after that, what did you do? Did you stay there, or did you go out on the call?
I went on another call after that.
All right. So then, when you left the premises, was the Bronco still parked generally where you indicated on 1254?
Yes.
And was it still open at that point?
Yes.
Now, before you leave, let me just ask a couple of questions about the area at T3. Who has access to vehicles parked there at T3 in that particular open lot?
When you say who has
Well-
access,
What, do the employees, you described there were maybe 50 employees at Fertel's at that time. Do the 50 employees have access to that lot? Can they go on that lot? Can they enter it and enter the cars that are there?
they can wander, do whatever they want. That same lot there, you have the public that comes in. You have other tow outfits that come in there to pick up cars.
So this is an area where a number of people come in and out, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there's anybody who polices or stops you from coming in there, anything of that nature at T3?
Well, they have a lot guy there, and a lot of times he's either too busy to handle everybody. And a lot of times they'll wander in, and a lot of times they get caught and asked to get out.
All right, now you described for us that you'd worked there for some 25 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
And these are your experiences over this period of time. You're testifying regarding your experiences over the 25 years or so you worked?
That's correct.
Now, all right, now then at some point you told us you went out on a call and that call was unrelated to Mr. O.J. Simpson's vehicle, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and how long were you on this call before you came back, if you recall?
Quite a few hours.
All right. Did you have some further contact with the Bronco vehicle on that date of June 15th, 1994?
Yes.
And about what time of day was that?
About 5:10, somewhere in there.
In the afternoon of the same
In
day?
the afternoon, yes.
All right. Did you have occasion then to see that vehicle shortly after 5 o'clock on June 15th?
Yes.
Where was the vehicle at that point?
Well, it had been moved from T3 over to T2.
So now if we look at 1254 again in the center there, it looks like a white building. That's T2. Is that where it had been moved to?
That's correct.
And for the record, Mr. Harris has put a magenta, I guess, arrow on T2. That's the building it had been moved into?
That's the building that had been moved.
Do you know who moved that vehicle into that T2 area?
No, I don't.
So between the time you left and the time you got back, the vehicle was not where you left it in T3, it was now in T2.
That's correct.
Okay. Did you have occasion to go into T2 and do something with regard to that vehicle?
When I returned at about 5:10, somewhere in there, yes.
All right, and tell us what happened, what you did.
I decided to put the papers back into the vehicle.
All right, these are the two
Vouchers.
vouchers, we'll call them vouchers, that you had. You
Yes.
decided to put them back, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and did you put them back in the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
And when you put them back in the vehicle, was that vehicle parked inside of T2? Was it still open or unlocked?
It was unlocked.
And what did you do? Did you open the door?
I opened the door.
And tell us what you did.
I opened the door, put them in the side pocket, and walked away from there.
Was anybody else around at that point?
No, nobody else.
All right, and you put the vouchers back where you got them?
Yes.
And why'd you bring them back and put them back?
Have no idea. Just put them back.
All right. Now, can you just tell us generally, where in T2 was the vehicle parked at that point?
Just about right there where that indication of T2, where the circle is where it was put in.
All right, Your Honor, we can use 1254 for identification at this point, and in the area where it's marked T2 is inside that building is where the Bronco was parked.
Yes.
All right. And when you put the receipts back in that, the vouchers back in the Bronco shortly after 5 on June 15th, at that point, did you see any blood inside that vehicle?
I didn't see any. Of course, I just went in, opened the door, and I didn't see any blood.
All right. And did you see any powder as though there had been any fingerprinting of that vehicle at that point?
Car was never printed.
All right. You didn't see any powder?
I didn't see no powder.
Okay. So, all right, after that, after you put the receipt back, did you have occasion to have any contact with the owner of Vertel's lot after that?
I went on a call,
Another call?
another call. I returned back 5:30, somewhere in there. I was due to get off at 6, and management called me in about 5:40
And when you went into management, who were you talking to?
to Bob Jones.
And is he who is Bob Jones?
Bob Jones is the manager of the establishment.
All right. And who else was present during this conversation?
It was just him and I.
All right, you had a conversation?
Yes.
All right, was the subject matter of that conversation these vouchers or these receipts that you had taken?
I was asked about him, yes.
And were you, you had shown these receipts or vouchers to other employees, had you not?
That's correct.
All right. Now, when you talked to your, he was your boss, was he?
Manager, yes.
Your manager
boss.
at that time? How long had he been your manager?
I really don't know.
All right.
It's more than 5 years.
Okay, more than 5 years?
Yes.
All right. Had you been there longer than he had?
He had a couple of years, few years more than I
Okay.
did.
All right, so you'd known him for a period of time, is that correct?
Yes.
Had you had some relationship with a family member of his?
Not with him.
With a family member of his?
Not a family of his, but the owner of the establishment of Vertel's.
All right, and the owner is some other person, is that right?
Yes, that's the owner that owns Vertel's Automotive.
Okay, and had you had a relationship with the owner's daughter?
Yes, I did.
And when was that? Well, I can link it up here.
This is overall.
Thank you. You,
Uh,
when was the relationship?
the relationship started back in during the Olympics. The Olympics were in '84.
Overall.
The relationship started in 1984, thereabouts?
Yes,
And how long did that relationship continue, if you recall?
till 1991.
About 7 years?
Yes,
And what was that relationship with? Was this with the owner's daughter?
that's correct.
All right. That relationship ended at some point?
I think we just established that.
Yes, and I was believing that was foundational, Your Honor. When it ended, the question was, Your Honor, it did end. How did that relationship end with the owner's daughter?
Well, when we broke up the relationship of her and I living together, we were still seeing each other on up till '82, and then we broke off permanent. And she had to work there, I had to work there, so I was like, I had to watch what I had to do.
All right. Did the ending, as in? Oh, let me ask one
Overall,
question.
goes to bias.
Yeah. Did the ending? Was it a pleasant ending, sir?
In my opinion, no, it wasn't a pleasant ending.
All right. And both of you continued to work at that location after that.
Yes,
And that's the man who owns this particular business?
this is correct.
Okay. And Bob Jones works for the owner. Is that right?
Yeah, he's the manager, yes.
Okay. All right. So in the course of your conversation with Mr. Jones, did he ask you a question about these vouchers or these receipts?
He asked me about the vouchers, yes.
And what did you tell him, if anything?
I denied it.
That you lied to him?
Yes, I did.
And why'd you lie to him?
I was on thin ice, and no matter what I said, he was going to come down on me.
All right. When you say you're on thin ice, what do you mean by that?
Well, a few days prior to this, I had said a few words.
Sustained.
Some incident occurred a few days before?
But that's correct.
Had it involved you and Mr. Jones
No,
or some other employee?
some other employee there.
And had you talked to him about that incident? Had you been called on the carpet regarding that incident?
Misleading.
No.
Sustained.
All right. There'd been some incident that preceded this, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so after you talked to him and you denied having removed these receipts or vouchers, tell us what happened after that.
He asked me, he said to me, he says that he had had word from other employees there that I had taken these papers out of the car. And I denied it. I says, I don't know anything about it. He says, well, he says, I have this information. I says, well, whatever information you got, I don't know what you're talking about. And he asked me to empty my pockets out.
All right. Did you do that at that point?
No, I refused to.
All right. And then what happened after that?
He said I was suspended.
All right. Now, at that point when you were talking to him, what time of evening was this on June 15th?
10 to 6.
All right. Had you replaced those vouchers or receipts back in the Bronco at that point?
They were already replaced back into the vehicle.
All right. But you still wouldn't let him look in your pockets?
Right.
All right. Now, after that, he suspended you?
After that, he suspended me, yes.
And that's June 15th,
June 15th.
a little before 6 o'clock in the afternoon?
That's correct.
Okay. And after you suspended, what happened after that?
Well, it was a nightmare to me. I mean, working there all those years,
All right.
I got home.
All right, so you were suspended as of that date, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, thereafter, did you have occasion to go back to that lot on or about June 17th, 1994, 2 days later?
Yes, he called me, I believe it was Thursday, which would be the 16th,
All right.
and said that him and myself and Bob Jones and Mr. Vertels would be in conference.
All right, will be 3 of you in conference?
Yes.
Okay. And when was that? Was there a meeting set up at that point?
Yes. This was for the 17th of June.
All right. And did you appear on the 17th of June?
Yes, I did.
And you recall and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about what time it was that you got there on the 17th of June?
I think it might have been about 10:30 in the morning.
All right. And when you got there, where did you go, if you recall?
I went directly to Bob's office. But prior to me going to Bob's office, I'd noticed that the Bronco had been moved again.
All right. Now, the Bronco, you told us about it being in the point of T3. You told us where it was, generally on T2. Now it had been moved for a third time since it was in Vertels. Is that right?
That's right.
Do you know who had moved it?
No, I wasn't there.
Okay, can you, if Mr. Harris puts that arrow up there, can you show us the third parking place for the Bronco, if he moves the arrow down? Still in the T2 area, right?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. That's where it was the first time. The second time, if you'll move that arrow to my left. Keep going. It was, no. Now go. Basically the same location as to where the marking of T2 is, but directly across.
Across from it.
Across from where the orange letter is in there, T2. Right in there is where it was put in.
This is that heading north? Is that north?
That would be the west side of the building.
West side of the building? All right, so if can we put a mark there and put JM? This point would be the point where the third parking space of the Bronco unit.
All right.
On 1254, I believe. All right, now, at that time, did you have occasion to go with Mr. Jones and someone else to that vehicle at that point?
Well, yes.
All right, tell us what happened.
After we had discussed things in Bob Jones' office, Vertel walked out, I walked out, and Bob walked out. All 3 of us walked out of there to go look into the Bronco.
All right, and prior to your walking to this point on 1254, the parking place of the Bronco, you'd had a conversation with the owner, Vertels, and Bob Jones and yourself. Is that right?
That's correct.
How long did that conversation last?
15 to 20 minutes.
All right, and after that conversation, you then walked out of the office over to T2. Is that right?
Well, Bob's office is basically in T2.
All right.
So we walked out of his office.
Okay. Now, before we get to the Bronco, with regard to T2, is T2, you've described for the cars that are in there, is that a place where cars are placed where there's some kind of a hole or for some special care?
Yes. Normally 99-100% of the cars that are towed that have an evidentiary hole on the vehicles, hole for prints or further investigation, they're normally put in there, kept away from the public.
All right. Is that a more secure facility than T3?
It's supposed to be secured.
All right. Well, is it, in actuality, was it secure? Well, that's...
Rephrase the question.
All right. Based upon your experience and having worked there for a period of time, tell us about the security regarding at T2 in that particular building.
Describe it, or?
Yes, describe it, sir, and how it worked.
Well, cars coming in, you've got the front door that if somebody comes in, there's a button that's raised that lifts the gate up. On the back end of the garage, the mechanics work there. On the side, which would be on the east side of the building, there's a door there where the driver's room is. There's a door there. A lot of times, a lot of customers would come in through there, not being escorted. They would come through there, catch us napping there, eating lunch or whatever, and we said, "What are you doing here?" "So I come to use the toilet."
All right. So would the 50 or so employees of Vertel's, would they have access to T2 also, that area?
Yeah, yes.
Overruled.
And could they just come in and out?
Well, anybody can come in and go out.
And that's T2 also?
Yes.
All right. Now, with regard to the vehicle and where it was parked, tell us what happened with regard to that between you, Bob Jones, and Vertel's.
Walked out of Bob's office, and we were walking in T2 towards the Bronco. Vertel came with us. Bob came with, he was standing next to me. There's two detectives that were in the building, but in the portion of where the drivers eat is where the detectives were. Bob said, "There's two detectives," and Vertel went one way, and Bob and I continued going towards the Bronco.
Is that to kind of throw off the detectives?
Exactly.
Sustained.
All right, well, what? Okay.
Wait,
I'm sorry.
jury is to disregard the last question and answer.
All right. Why did you do that?
Well, Bob didn't want to make it obvious that we were going towards the Bronco.
All right.
Sustained, answer stricken. Jury is to disregard.
All right. At any rate, did you have some conversation with Bob about how you would get to that Bronco?
Well, when we were going to Bronco, we didn't think the detectives would be in there.
Sustained.
All right.
Answer stricken.
At any rate, you got to the Bronco at some point, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you got there, were any detectives around the vehicle at that point?
Yes.
And when you got there, the detectives were around that vehicle?
No.
All right. And did you have occasion to get inside the vehicle or to look inside the vehicle at that point?
I opened the door to the Bronco.
All right. Now, is this which time is this? This is time number?
Fourth time.
The fourth time.
Yes.
All right. The vehicle's still unlocked.
That's correct.
All right. Describe for us what you did when you opened the vehicle.
I opened the door, and Bob says to me, like, "Hurry up," because of the detectives being there. And I says,
Sustained, answer is stricken in its entirety. Jury is to disregard. Ask another question.
All right. After you opened the door, don't tell us what Bob said. You opened the door, and then what happened?
I opened the door. I said, "They're not there,"
When you mean they're not there, what are you talking about?
referring to the papers that I had removed from there, from the Bronco.
These papers you put back in there?
Exactly.
All right. And you didn't see them at that point, is that right?
Yeah, I didn't see them in there, no.
All right. Do you know who taken them after you put them back?
No, I don't.
Sustained. Tardy, though. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Did you go back to the same area where you placed these vouchers back yourself?
Yes, I did.
And did you see them there at that location?
No, I did not.
Have they been there when you last left that vehicle on June 15th in the afternoon?
They were last there, yes.
All right. And they were there, not there now, is that right?
They were not there now.
All right. Now, after that, after you didn't see these vouchers there, what happened after that, sir?
Bob and I walked back to his office.
All right. Now, at that point, you were on suspension, is that correct?
Well, he called it investigating, is what he called it.
All right. Then after your conversation with him on the 17th, were you still on suspension or was your status changed?
I was going to go on vacation, and he knew I was going to go on vacation. He says, "Well,"
Sustained.
All right. You were about to go on vacation, you just told us?
yes,
Let me ask you that without telling us what Bob Jones said at that point. Did you go on vacation?
yes, I did.
And were you being paid for the time on vacation, if you know?
Yes,
All right. So you went on vacation. You had this paid vacation coming, right?
that's correct.
And while you were out on vacation, did you have occasion to come back to Vertel's sometime in and around June 11th of 1994?
I returned back July 11th.
Did I say June 11th?
Yes.
I meant July 11th, Your Honor. And about July 11th, 1994? Tell us what happened on July 11th.
I was due back July 11th, and I had called on a Friday prior to July 11th, and I wanted to take an extra week of vacation. And while Bob had me on the telephone, he says, "Oh, by the way, I need to talk to you."
All right. And did you make arrangements to come down and see Mr. Bob Jones after that?
Yes.
And when did you, do you recall when you came in on that date?
I went back July 11th.
All right. And what time of day was that, if you recall?
I was about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning.
All right. And did you come to Bob Jones's office?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall whether or not you saw the Bronco at all on that day?
Yes, I seen the Bronco.
And where was it parked in the same point as we indicated there at 1254 with the magenta arrow there?
Yes,
All right, still the same place now?
yes.
Okay. Did you go over to it on that occasion?
No, I didn't go to the Bronco, no.
All right. You went to Bob Jones's office,
Yes.
and did you have a conversation with him?
Yes, I did.
And did your employment status change as of that day?
Yes, I did.
And what happened to you?
I was terminated.
And have you worked there since that date at all?
No, I haven't.
Now, I noticed that you have two lawyers with you today, and have you brought some kind of a lawsuit against Vertels?
Yes, I did. I filed a wrongful termination.
And are these gentlemen who are seated back over to my right, are they representing you in that lawsuit?
Yes, they are.
That matter's still pending now, is that right?
Still pending, yes.
All right. Now, on any of the occasions when you had occasion to either tow the car or be around the car, did you have occasion to look at or make note of the physical condition of this particular car?
Are we the Bronco?
Yes, the Bronco. We're talking
Yes.
about when you first picked it up at the print.
There was an inventory that was made of the vehicle on the day that I picked it up.
That would have been on June 15th, is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you fill that inventory out or did someone else?
I had started the impound sheet on there.
All right, and is that on the form that I previously showed you, 1253?
Yes.
And I might approach you again. I'm going to place this is a copy of 1253 I'll place before you. Is there a place on here where you can show us where you'd started the inventory of that vehicle?
I didn't start the inventory. I started the impound sheet.
Okay. All right, and was there a place for an inventory of the vehicle, though?
Yes, on the middle of the impound sheet, there's an inventory of the vehicle. Indicates seat, front, so forth.
All
And,
right. Did you have occasion to look at that particular vehicle to see whether or not it had any kind of damage?
when I towed it in, the vehicle had no damage at all.
All right, and you made an visual observation to determine that yourself?
Yes, I did. And for me to sign my name on there, I have to go through that vehicle and inspect it myself and then put my signature. Any damage done to that vehicle, I'm responsible for.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
And you didn't see any damage, is that correct?
I didn't see any damage at all.
At any time later, did you ever see any damage to that particular vehicle at all?
There was no damage in that vehicle when I left it there.
When you last dealt with it, is that right?
That's right.
Just a second here. two photographs. 1254A is a printout, and I think there's also a 1254B, is there?
Yes.
A and B, if the clerk pleases. Just one last question or so.
One is T2 location number 1 and T2 location number 2, correct?
That is correct, Your Honor. Thank you. You indicated that based upon this inventory, whatever, you didn't see any damage to the vehicle, and you, other than what you've described for us, where the carpeting was cut out on the driver's side. Is that right?
That's correct.
Very well, I have nothing further this witness at this point, Your Honor.
Ms. Clark?
Good morning, Mr. Meraz.
Good morning.
Now, as you stated, sir, when Mr. Jones first confronted you with having taken those receipts from the Bronco, you lied, didn't you?
That's correct.
And you told him you took nothing from the Bronco, didn't you?
He asked me about the papers.
And you said you did not take them.
That's correct.
But you had.
This is true.
And you put them in your pocket,
Shirt.
shirt pocket. Yes?
That's correct.
And then later on, he asked you to remove the contents of your pocket, didn't he?
He did.
And you refused.
That's correct.
And you refused because you had those receipts in your shirt pocket, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
But you refused to empty your pocket for him, didn't you?
It's correct.
And after you lied to Bob Jones and you refused to remove the contents of your pockets, he suspended you. Isn't that right?
Suspended me, yes.
Now, when you went back to the Bronco on June the 17th, you went with Mr. Vertel and you went with Mr. Jones. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Now, again, on that date, you were confronted by Mr. Vertel about having taken something from the Bronco, correct?
Correct.
And you lied again, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
When Mr. Vertel confronted you at first on June the 17th and asked you if you took something from the Bronco, you said you did not.
It's not true.
Mr. Meraz, let me remind you. Well, let me first ask you something else. Before you came to this trial, to this courtroom today and yesterday, you testified at a pretrial hearing, didn't you?
Correct.
And at that hearing, you testified about many of the same things you've testified here in court to, correct?
Correct.
Going to show counsel page 5389. 5389. Like I'm showing it to Mr. Meraz's attorneys as well as to Mr. Cochran.
Yes, proceed.
I didn't finish.
I'm going to show you the page of a transcript. Before I do, it is your testimony at this point that when you went in to see Mr. Vertel and Mr. Jones on June the 17th, and they asked you again whether you took anything from the side pocket of the Bronco, you said no. You continued to lie.
It's not true.
Do you recall them showing you statements written out by other employees who saw you with those receipts taken from the Bronco?
I remember them showing them to me, yes.
And do you also recall, sir, that it was only after they showed you those written statements that said they saw you with the receipts that you took out of the Bronco that you admitted that it was true?
It's not true. It's not true.
All right, Mr. Meraz, do you recall being asked the following questions at the pretrial hearing in this matter, page 5389? You returned to Vertel's 2 days later on June the 17th, did you not? Answer, correct. Question, on that date you met with Mr. Richard Vertel and Bob Jones, is that correct? That's true. Question, and once again, on that date you were asked by Mr. Vertel, this time if you had removed any items from the Ford Bronco. Is that correct? Answer, that's correct. And at first you denied taking anything out of the Bronco. Isn't that right? Answer, that is not true. At first you denied taking from the anything from the Ford Bronco, did you not? Answer, at first, yes.
Overruled. Question? Do you have a question?
Yes. Now, do you recall at first denying it to Mr. Vertel and then admitting it only after he showed you written statements of the other employees who saw you holding the receipts that you stole from the Bronco?
Rephrase the question.
That's misleading there.
I'm asking you a question, sir. Do you remember that happening?
No objection.
That didn't happen.
It didn't happen?
No, that didn't happen
Did
that
they
way.
show
Hold
you
on.
the...
Hold on, there's an
I
objection.
have an objection, and I'd like to show the court something on the record with regard to transcript.
Ms. Clark, show it to Ms. Clark first. Proceed.
I have an objection with regard to this.
Noted. Thank you. Proceed. Proceed.
Then is your testimony that when you testified at the pretrial hearing, you did not admit that you initially lied to Mr. Vertel again on June the 17th?
And when Mr. Hodgman questioned me, I had told him...
The answer requires yes or no, Mr. Meraz.
No, we all don't get to talk at the same time. He's allowed to finish his answer.
When Mr. Hodgman talked to me,
Well, objection, Your Honor, this is non-responsive.
I don't know if it is or not. I haven't heard the
It required a
question.
yes or no.
No, it doesn't. He's entitled to explain his answer. Mr. Meraz, answer the question, please.
when Mr. Hodgman asked me the same question that you had asked me, we were talking about Bob Jones, that I had lied to him, and then he came right back and asked me the same thing that you had did. I says, no, I never lied to Bob or Vertel on the second day. And that-
Okay.
So I never did.
So it's your testimony now that you only lied on the first day. Is that right?
Overruled.
Is that your testimony, sir?
I lied to Bob.
That's your testimony.
That's my testimony.
And your testimony is currently that you did not lie again to Mr. Vertel and Mr. Jones on the 17th. Is that
That's-
your testimony?
That's correct.
But nevertheless, you do recall being shown written statements of your fellow employees who said they saw you with the receipts that you stole from the Bronco.
I never read those statements.
You saw them, didn't you?
Well, there were papers shown to me like this.
But you claim you didn't read them.
I didn't read them. No, I didn't.
But it was after you were shown those statements that you submitted a statement admitting to having taken the papers out of the Bronco. Isn't that right?
It's not right.
Do you see the statement that you wrote out for Mr. Vertel?
Excuse me?
Did you see the statement you wrote out for Mr. Vertel?
That I wrote out for Vertel?
Yes.
I don't remember me writing a statement to Vertel.
You don't recall that? All right, we'll have time. I'm going to pull that up for you and show you. I'm going to ask you to identify that. That is your handwriting.
Okay?
You don't recall Mr. Vertel, however, asking you to furnish him with a written statement concerning your position in this matter?
I don't recall that.
You don't recall that?
I don't recall ever me signing any statement.
You don't recall ever signing a statement concerning your theft of the receipts from the Bronco?
I don't recall that unless you got something.
Oh, you mean you'll change your testimony if I show you something?
That's not what I'm saying.
What's your testimony, sir? Did you write something out like that or not?
I don't recall myself doing that.
Now, when you went to the Bronco on the 17th and looked in the side pocket, where you claimed you had put the receipts back, they were not there, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, they never did turn up again. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And these attorneys, these two attorneys that are sitting here, are representing you in your wrongful termination suit?
That's correct.
You need two attorneys for that, do you, sir?
Object to that.
Sustained.
All right, so you're looking to get some money out of Vertel's for what you claim to be your wrongful termination. Is that right?
Not necessarily true.
You're not seeking money? You're not seeking money in your wrongful termination suit, are you, Mr. Meraz? Is that it?
If it comes my way, yes. I'll take it.
Have you filed legal papers in your wrongful termination suit, Mr. Meraz?
Yes.
And do those legal papers ask for money from Vertel's for being wrongfully fired?
Overruled.
I haven't seen any dollars or signs on those papers yet because I don't know what we're suing for.
Don't those pleadings indicate that you are going to be asking for monetary damages in some amount, if not currently known, then the amount that will be determined at a later time?
That's correct.
So you expect to get money, do you not,
That's
from the
correct.
wrongful termination suit? Thank you, Mr. Meraz. And if you testify here in court today that you took those receipts and you kept them, and you never put them back in the Bronco, you will lose that suit, won't you, Mr. Meraz?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Isn't it true, Mr. Meraz, that your lawyers are sitting here to make sure that you never admit to having put those papers back in the Bronco? That you never admit to stealing those papers?
Sustained. Sustained to the form of the question. Jury is to disregard the implication of that question.
Mr. Meraz, are you concerned that if you admit to us here today that you stole those receipts from the Bronco and never put them back, that you will lose your wrongful termination suit?
I didn't take them.
Could you please answer my question?
I didn't take them.
You did take them out of the Bronco, sir, didn't you?
Yes.
You did put them in your pocket, didn't you?
Yes.
And when you were asked on that very same day that you took them out of the Bronco and put them in your pocket, to empty your pockets, you refused, didn't you?
I sure did.
Thank you. Are you concerned, sir, that if you admit that you never put those receipts back in the Bronco, that you will lose your wrongful termination suit?
I didn't quite follow you. You want to repeat that again, please?
Yes. Are you concerned that if you admit that you took those receipts out of the Bronco and never returned them, you will lose your wrongful termination suit?
All I know is that I put those papers back in there.
Can you answer my question, sir?
I assume yes.
Now, when you picked up the Bronco on June the 15th, you picked it up from the print shed, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the print shed is a big tin building that is enclosed, that has doors that close off, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And there is a guard shack in which a police officer is posted to guard the vehicles kept in that print shack. Isn't that right?
I've never seen a guard there.
Didn't you just testify on direct that you spoke to the guard and told him who you were and he let you in?
The guard shack's across the street at 150 North San Pedro. That's where the guard shack is.
And you had to make contact with the person in that guard shack in order to get to the print shed. Isn't that right?
I was directed to get there.
Didn't you have to make contact with the person in the guard shack to be let into the print shed, sir?
Most of the time when we arrive,
I'm asking about June the 15th.
yes,
Thank you. And the Bronco was inside the print shack, wasn't it?
away from the guard shack, yes.
It was inside the print shack, wasn't it?
Yes,
Now, when you saw that Bronco for the first time on June the 15th, you noticed that a floor mat had been missing, correct?
correct.
Which caused you to conclude, as you testified on direct, that evidence had already been removed from the Bronco at the print shack, correct?
Overruled. Overruled.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, aren't you also aware that blood had already been removed by Dennis Fung on June the 14th at the print shack?
Sustained. Foundation.
You did not see the Bronco on the 14th, is that correct?
That's correct.
You did not see the Bronco on the 13th either, is that correct?
That's correct.
When you went over to the Bronco, sir, can you describe to us how you opened the door?
Which time are you asking me on this?
I'm talking about the first time you saw it on the 15th.
I backed the car out, brought it out. Got out from the driver's side of the tow truck and walked up to it.
Okay, you walked up to the Bronco for the purpose of preparing the hookup, is that right?
Yes.
And you were going to leave some paperwork in the car as well, weren't you?
Never left any paperwork in the car.
Never put any paperwork inside the car.
Never did.
What did you do when you first approached the Bronco itself?
When I pulled it out,
You indicated to us on direct, sir, that you went over and went inside the Bronco in some manner when it was in the print shack.
I didn't go into the Bronco in the print shed. It was when I brought it out.
So you first hooked it up and pulled it out of the print shack,
Yes,
and you did not open the driver's door at all while it was inside the print shack. Is that right?
that's correct.
And after you pulled it out of the print shack, you then went into the Bronco itself?
Yes,
And did you do that by entering through the driver's side door?
that's correct.
And you used your left hand to open the handle?
Might have used my right hand.
Is that what you do when you go to the driver's side of a door?
Overruled.
You went over, just picture what you did. You went over to the driver's side of the car to open the door. Do you have a picture in your mind of the way that handle looked?
I have a picture of it, yes.
What kind of handle is it, Mr. Meraz?
Oh, it's a handle that where you stick your hand, pull up on it, and pulls out.
Okay. And you used your right hand to open it?
Left.
Left hand.
Correction, left.
And when you used your left hand to open the door, that driver's side door, you didn't see any blood on the door.
When I opened it,
Right.
I looked at the door.
And did you see any blood?
I didn't see any.
Did you ever see any blood on the driver's side of that door?
I didn't see any blood. I didn't see any.
All right, and then you got inside and you put both hands on the steering wheel, is that right?
I had both hands on the steering wheel, yes.
And did you touch the console area? That's the armrest between the passenger and the driver's side?
I don't think I did.
Did you look at the console area?
Yes.
Did you look carefully at the console area, sir?
I took a glance of it.
Well, you got into the car again on a second occasion, correct?
Correct.
On that same day?
Yes.
June the 15th we're talking about, right?
Yes.
And you looked at the console area specifically again that second time you got into the Bronco on June the 15th?
Yes.
And you looked carefully because you were looking for blood, is that right?
That's right.
Have you ever testified before that you were looking carefully for blood?
Sustained. It's a speaking objection.
Did you ever tell your lawyers or anyone else before you came to court or met with Mr. Cochran that you were specifically looking carefully for blood in that car?
Overruled. Overruled.
That I was especially looking for blood?
Right.
Yes.
Who was the first person you told that you were specifically looking carefully for blood when you got into the Bronco on June the 15th?
The employees there at the yard?
At Vertel's?
Yes.
Let me show you again the,
1254.
1254 now? Defense 1254?
I believe this is 1254B.
Is it B? You see the marker called T3?
Yes.
I noticed you had to put your glasses on, Mr. Meraz. Do you use them for driving?
For reading?
Only reading?
Yes.
I also noticed that you're using them to look at the monitor, correct? Are you unable to see the marker T3 without your glasses, sir?
If I got up here and looked, oh, I could see it. From there to there, I could look at it. From here, close up, I can't see. That's why I have them. Care to look?
Mr. Meraz, what color is that marker, T3?
That marker right there that you're just pointing at right now?
Yeah.
Pinkish color?
Pinkish?
Yes.
You're colorblind, aren't you, Mr. Meraz?
Overruled.
Aren't you?
I don't think I am.
You think that's pink?
Overruled.
Are you talking about the arrow or are you talking about that dot that's marked T3?
About the arrows is what you wanted, right?
No, I said the dot, T3. What
Oh,
color
the
is that
dot.
dot?
That's green.
All right. When you first pulled that car,
Nope. It speaks for itself.
when you first pulled the Bronco over to the area marked as T3, was that because somebody told you to leave it there until they made space in T2?
No.
Sir, isn't it true that there was a Mr. Saul Gutierrez there waiting to move it into the secure area known as T2, and that they had to make room for it? That's why you left it there in T3?
Saul, which he's called there at the yard. I told him that I would leave it there and he could do whatever he want with it later.
You don't know how quickly he moved it into T2 because you left. Isn't that true?
That's true.
You left immediately after you pulled into T3. Isn't that true?
15, 20 minutes later, I might have left.
But when you came back after going out on the call, the car was in T2, the secure area. Isn't that right?
When I came back, yes, it was in T2.
And T2 is the area where you keep cars that are to be held for evidentiary hold. Isn't that right, sir?
That's correct.
And regardless of what's on that paperwork, this car was in that area, isn't it? Wasn't it?
Yes.
Now I want to show you some photographs, sir. Well, you indicated, did you not, sir, that you could not see any print dust on the car at all, correct?
That's correct.
And again, you were looking very carefully for that print dust. Is that right?
You could see it. If it's obvious, if it's on a car, you could see it.
You know what it looks like. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were you looking carefully for print dust that day?
Yes,
And you didn't see any, correct?
I didn't see any.
I have your photograph. I'll ask you about people's next in order.
528.
528.
Yes.
People's 528. back up for a second. You recognize the location that's shown in this photograph, sir? That's the print shack, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And you recognize that car, of course, that's the Bronco, isn't it?
That's correct.
And that's where you picked up the Bronco on June the 15th, isn't it?
That's correct.
In fact, that was the position it was in when you hooked it up to your tow truck and pulled it out, correct?
Correct.
Zoom in. What do you see there on the door, Mr. Meraz?
Powder.
Looks like
Print
print
powder.
dust.
Looks like print powder, yes.
That's the print dust that you didn't see when you picked it up on June the 15th from the print shack where it's shown in this photograph.
Yes.
Okay, print. I'd like to print the close-up, Your Honor, and ask that it be marked People's 528A.
528A.
Now, you also indicate, sir, that there were no keys to the Bronco when you saw it on June the 15th, correct?
Correct.
In fact, there never were any keys that you saw that went to that Bronco, were there?
I didn't see any.
In fact, sir, were you aware of the fact that on June the 14th, officers had to use a Slim Jim to break into the car?
Sustain. Sustain. The objection is foundation, counsel. Sustain.
You indicate that you had to examine the car carefully for any damage, correct?
Correct.
And any damage would also include any kind of evidence of tampering or break-in of that car, correct?
Damage that's obvious is what we indicate, that
Okay,
you're able to see with the eye.
So if there's some minor scratches or dings on the car that are very small, that's not noted as damage, correct?
Dents and scratches.
If there are very minor scratches, do you note that on the form?
Scratches, dents and scratches. It comes on that category.
And when you do that, do you attempt to find out whether any of those scratches were perhaps put on there by law enforcement personnel in the course of dealing with the car? Wouldn't that be important to know,
But there wasn't any dent scratches that I noticed.
that you noticed?
Right.
So the condition that you see the Bronco in this photograph, People's 528, can you back out? That's the condition in which you saw it. Is that correct, sir?
When I pulled it out of there, yes.
Can we go back into the handle? You indicated to us a couple minutes ago that this was a pull handle. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Is that a pull handle, sir?
When you go up, come out. Evidently not. From that, push the button. I was wrong.
You're wrong about the print dust, too, weren't you, sir?
See the prints there, or the powder there? Yeah, I see that now.
Of course, you weren't wearing your glasses on that date when you went to hook up the car, were you?
I had them, yes.
Were you wearing them?
Make out the impound sheet, yes.
Were you wearing them when you examined the car carefully for blood, as you've testified?
I wasn't wearing them, no.
Were you wearing them when you examined the car to look for print dust?
No.
Now, did you attempt to ascertain whether any officers had been required to use a Slim Jim to open the locked door of that Bronco on June the 14th in order to more accurately fill out your impound sheet?
I don't believe I had asked how they got in.
Did you ever find out?
No. Wasn't there long enough.
I'm sorry?
I wasn't there long enough
You weren't where long enough?
to find out how they got into it.
How long would you have to be there to find out how they got into it?
Let's move on. Ms. Clark, do you have much more?
Yes, I do. Thank you. All right, you've also testified, sir, that you saw no blood in the Bronco, correct?
Correct.
We're showing you a photograph now. I think it's been previously marked, Your Honor, on a board, but in an abundance of caution, I'm going to ask that
529.
I'd ask you first look at this photograph without your glasses, sir. People's 529. Tell us if you see any blood.
See blood up on top, 22. Some down there where 23 is. 21, I don't see any down there. Yes, I do. I see it now.
Okay. Are you aware that these photographs were taken on...
Sustained.
It's foundation, Your Honor. It's already in the evidence.
Sustained.
You see that blood there on the door, sir?
Yes.
Do you know when these photographs were taken?
I have no idea.
If they were taken on June the...
Overruled.
If they were taken on June the 14th, sir, before you got to the Bronco on June the 15th, would you admit that you are mistaken about having no blood in the Bronco?
Overruled. Overruled.
I didn't see any blood.
You're not telling this jury that there was no blood inside the Bronco, are you? You're just telling them you didn't see it.
Telling them I didn't see any blood.
And you don't recall seeing the blood that you now see in this photograph.
Overruled.
I didn't see that in there.
People's 530, Your Honor. Again, I think this is marked on a board already as well. Tell us if you can see any blood in this photograph, sir.
Yes, I do.
You see the blood by 31 and 30 there?
Yes, I do.
And do you know that these photographs were taken on June the 14th?
No, I don't.
But you didn't see this blood either.
I didn't see that either.
Were you attempting to look at that particular area? That's the console area between the driver and the passenger seat?
The view I had from the steering wheel, half in, half out, looking in, is the view I had.
All right, so you never looked at the console, is that right?
Sustained. Phrase the question.
Okay. Well, you tell us, sir, did you look carefully at the console area on the passenger side to see if there was blood?
I had a view of the console.
Did you have a view of the passenger side of the console area that's shown in this photograph on June the 15th?
On the right-hand side, no. Didn't have.
Now, on June the 15th, the first time you got into the Bronco, you stated to us that you got in the driver's side
Yes.
and you were partially in,
Partially in, yes.
and you touched the steering wheel with both hands,
Yes.
and you checked the emergency brake.
Yes.
And how did you do that?
With my left hand, I pulled it out.
And you did not see any floor mat there, correct?
There was no floor mat, no.
Did you sit in the passenger seat, sir?
Half in, half out.
What
Half
were you-
my body in and out.
What were you doing in the passenger side of the car?
I was hanging onto the steering wheel at an angle. You mean the passenger side?
Right.
Oh, I wasn't on the passenger side, no. I'm
You only
sorry.
got in the driver's side, is that right?
That's correct.
As a matter of fact, of all 3 times that you went to the Bronco, you only got on the driver's side of the car, is that correct?
That's correct.
Has it ever happened in your experience, sir, that a car is towed and taken into police custody for which there are no keys?
A lot of times.
Overruled.
A lot of times, cars come in with no keys.
And when the cars come in with no keys, you can't lock them, correct?
That's correct.
Because then you couldn't get back into the car, correct?
Correct.
And this car was never locked, correct? At least when you saw it.
When I saw it, it was never locked.
Now, when you got into the Bronco on the first occasion, sir, were you bleeding?
I don't think I was. No,
When you got into the car on the second occasion, sir, were you bleeding?
no,
And when you got into the car on the third occasion, were you bleeding?
no,
And when you opened the door to look at the side door, driver's side pocket with Mr. Jones and Mr. Vertel, were you bleeding?
no.
Now, when you looked inside the car on any of the 3 occasions that you looked, did you notice that the dome light bulb was missing?
Never paid any attention to it.
Overruled.
Did you ever notice the dome light bulb underneath the passenger seat of that car?
Sustained.
You looked inside the car, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you ever see the dome light bulb anywhere in the car other than, let me ask, did you see the dome light bulb for that car? And by the dome light bulb, I mean the interior dome light bulb for that car, anywhere around the floor area of the car?
Wasn't looking for it.
Was your answer no then, you didn't see it?
Wasn't looking for it. I didn't see it. I wasn't looking for it.
It's your job, as you testified earlier, to make some record of the condition of the Bronco, correct?
Correct.
And so if the dome light is missing, dome light bulb is missing from the interior of the car, it would be your job to make a note of that, correct?
Sustained.
If there is some,
Phrase the question.
okay. If there is something missing or unusual about the condition of the car, whether it's exterior or interior, it's your job to notice that. Isn't that correct? And make note of it.
When we make notes of vehicles that are towed in, we make notes of radio, hubcaps, and damage that's on a vehicle. Very rare does anybody pay any attention to a light dome.
How about if the dome light cover is missing as well as the light bulb? Would that be something you take note of?
Overruled.
No,
You wouldn't take note of that?
unless I noticed it.
Overruled.
I have a photograph. I have a photograph I'd like to mark people's file.
No objection to marking, but I'd like to touch on this date, that photograph was taken. Foundation.
Sidebar with corporate, please. right, thank you, counsel. Oops, I'm sorry. Ms. Clark.
Okay. So let me ask you a question about, you indicated you did not notice whether the dome-like cover and light bulb was missing from the interior of the Bronco when you saw it on June the 15th, correct?
Correct.
And I take it that when you went back to the Bronco on June the 17th with Mr. Vertel and Mr. Jones, you also made no effort to examine the interior of the Bronco to see whether or not the dome-like cover and light bulb were missing, correct?
Correct.
Nevertheless, when you opened the car door, no light came on, correct?
Or will,
I don't know if a light came on or not. I don't know.
Well, you opened that car door 3 different times on June the 15th, is that right?
Correct.
And you do not recall whether or not a light came on when you opened the door?
I don't recall.
Sir, are you aware that this Bronco has no manual control for the interior dome light? So that if you want to make sure it doesn't go on when you open the door, you have to take out the light bulb?
sustained. Sustained.
Are you aware of how the interior light bulb of the Bronco works, sir?
Never driven a Bronco.
And you made no particular effort to see how this one operated, correct?
Or will.
No keys.
And you never did have any keys for that Bronco, correct?
As far as I know, there was no keys.
Now, when you saw the Bronco inside the T2 area, that's an enclosed area, correct?
Correct.
That's interior, correct?
Building.
And the first time you went into the Bronco at Vertel's, it was in T3, is that right?
That's correct.
And the second time you went into the Bronco at Vertel's, it was in T2, correct?
Correct.
And the third time that you went to the Bronco was with Mr. Vertel and Mr. Jones inside T2 as well, correct? Or was that the fourth time?
That was the fourth time.
So at least 2 of the 3 times that you went into the Bronco at Vertel's, it was in an inside enclosed area. Isn't that right?
3 of the times, yes. Or 2 of the times.
Yeah. There were 3 times at Vertel's that you went into the Bronco.
Correct.
Actually, you went into the Bronco the first time in T3, correct?
Right.
Excuse me,
The-
counsel.
that's-
Wait. Mr. Cochran did start off the examination first time print shed, so let's not get our numbers mixed up here.
Right. Okay, when you went into the Bronco in the print shed, you had pulled it outside already, correct?
That's correct.
Right. Now, when you got to Vertel's, you went into it again at T3.
Correct.
And then when you came, and that's when you took the receipts out of the Bronco?
Correct.
And then when you came back from your call, you went back to the Bronco when it was already in T2. Is that right?
That's right.
And at that point, it was your testimony that you went back to the Bronco when it was inside T2 to return the receipts. Is that right?
That's right.
And you had to make sure that you would return the receipts to the same place you took them from, correct?
Correct.
And so you opened the door and you put them back in the side pocket. Is that right?
Correct.
And you don't remember whether or not there was a light that illuminated the interior of the car or not?
Or will.
I wasn't looking for a light.
You weren't looking for blood either, were you, sir? You were looking for receipts.
Or will.
The press had stated earlier that there was blood all over this vehicle, and I was curious.
And
I
so you
didn't
were
see-
making a careful inspection for blood.
Or will.
Me and the other employees that were there.
But you didn't see any of the blood I showed you in the photographs, correct?
No, I didn't see that.
And you're
Correct.
aware that Officer Thompson testified that he saw blood in the Bronco yesterday?
Sustained.
You've been following this trial on television, sir?
I look at it, yes.
And you've been following it since the trial began in January, isn't that right?
Off and on, yes.
And you've seen other witnesses whose testimony has dealt with the appearance of the interior of the Bronco, haven't you?
Not all the time, no.
Some of them?
Some of them.
How about the officer who testified yesterday, Officer Thompson, who saw the interior of the Bronco?
Sustained. Sustained. It's compound.
Did you see the testimony of Officer Thompson, who testified in this courtroom yesterday?
No, I didn't.
Did you see Officer Thompson in this court building yesterday?
Yes.
And did you discuss with him the nature of your testimony?
No.
Did you hear what he had to say about his testimony?
Till after I'd testified.
And after you testified yesterday?
It was on the news.
And you watched it on the news, didn't you?
Basically, it was just a bit, not all of it, just a bit.
And on the news, it told of how he...
Sustained. I think the jury recollects what was testified to yesterday. Let's move on.
All right, now those two receipts that you talk about, do you recall testifying to the dates of those receipts, sir?
Not the date, the month.
And what was the month
March.
of 1994?
This is true.
For both of them, correct?
Yes.
Now, when was the first time that you met with the defense involved in this case, sir?
The first time?
Yes.
I believe before I was going to come to testify sometime in October.
Yes, and do you recall having a meeting with defense investigators in this case on August 28th?
August 28th?
Yes.
Sure, yes.
And they came to your house, didn't they, sir?
They sure did.
And at that time, you had no attorneys present, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And after you had that meeting with defense investigators in your house, you met with the lawyer for one of the lawyers for the defendant, Mr. Jerry Ullman, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And you met with Mr. Ullman in his office, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And at that time, you had two lawyers present for you, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Were these the same lawyers who are present in court today?
Yes.
And at that time, you had begun your lawsuit against Vertels for unlawful termination, correct?
Oral.
Yes.
Now, on August 28th, when you met, at the time you met with the defense investigators, you indicated to us you had no lawyers present, correct?
Correct.
And prior to August 28th, have you ever had a lawyer before?
Sustained.
At the point when you met with Mr. Ullman, no, strike that. Between August 28th and the meeting you had with Mr. Ullman, sometime after August 28th, you hired some lawyers, is that correct?
Correct.
You hired 3 lawyers, isn't that right?
3 lawyers? No.
Were
2.
there not? You only hired 2 lawyers?
Yes.
And that was the first time you'd ever hired lawyers, isn't that right?
Sustained.
How did you find those lawyers, sir?
Sustained.
May I approach? I have an offer.
Sustained.
Did you consult with Mr. Ullman as to who you should bring in as your lawyers in this case?
I don't think I did.
You're not sure?
Oh. I don't think that was discussed.
You don't recall discussing who you should hire to represent you?
No, we didn't discuss that.
Do you recall discussing that with the defense investigators, sir?
I might have with the investigators discussed it because I didn't have a lawyer. I was on the verge of getting lawyers then.
And the defense in this case helped you to find some lawyers.
Let me see counsel at sidebar with court reporter, please.